The 8-year-old crown prince threw himself into a well and died in the imperial study. As his birth mother and the empress of the realm, I did not panic in the slightest. However, my own younger sister, noble consort Xian, was driven to the brink of madness. She sent 18 eunuchs and maids one after another to deliver the news, screaming that the crown prince had drowned and ordering me to rush to the imperial study at once. I simply ordered the gates of Cunning Palace to be shut tight. Then sat back leisurely and played the Qin. In my past life, when I heard the news, I had rushed to the imperial study like a madwoman, only to find the crown prince's cold, lifeless body. The crown prince's tutor claimed that before his death, the prince had wept incessantly, recounting the long-term physical abuse he had suffered at the hands of the empress. Unable to bear the torment any longer, he had chosen to end his life by throwing himself into the well. Even my own blood sister, who shared my palace quarters, had publicly accused me of flogging the crown prince daily in my bedroom, but I had always cherished the crown prince like a precious jewel. I had never once raised my voice at him harshly, let alone laid a hand on him. Amidst the chorus of public accusations, the imperial physician lifted the crown prince's robe, revealing a body covered from head to toe in dense, overlapping scars, old wounds layered upon new ones, accumulated over years of abuse. The imperial physician concluded without hesitation that the crown prince had been subjected to prolonged physical torture. The emperor flew into a rage and ordered me to be paraded through the streets in disgrace. Amidst the jeers and curses of thousands, I was torn apart by 5 horses, my dismembered body thrown to the dogs. Even as I drew my last breath, I could not fathom why my beloved son, whom I had doted on with all my heart, would end his life covered in such horrific scars. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the very day the crown prince committed suicide. Sister, a soft, sweet voice called out, yesterday, His Majesty sent me a luminous pearl. I know you have always loved collecting such treasures, so I brought it specially for you. My younger sister, noble consort Xian, stood before me with a radiant smile, holding a rare and magnificent luminous pearl up to my eyes, looking at her familiar, gentle, and affectionate face. I felt a sharp jolt of shock pierce my heart. Our parents had passed away when we were young, and we had relied on each other for survival, our bond as sisters deeper than anything else in the world. So when I became the empress and the mistress of the harem, I had specially arranged for her to enter the palace. I had used all my power and influence to help her rise to the position of noble consort Xian, admired and respected by all. The emperor, knowing how close we were, had granted her a special privilege. She could live with me in the side hall of Cunning Palace. In the cutthroat politics of the harem, my sister had always seemed unassuming and non-competitive, putting my interests above all else. Whenever she received something rare or precious, she would bring it to me to share without hesitation. When I fell ill, she had nursed me day and night, personally wiping my body and boiling my medicinal herbs. In this palace of endless intrigue and betrayal, the deep sisterly love between us had become a legendary tale, envied by everyone. If I had not witnessed it with my own eyes in my past life, if she had not stood before the entire court, her delicate eyebrows furrowed in rage, publicly denouncing me as a venomous, heartless woman who had tortured the crown prince for years, I would never have believed that this soft-spoken, obedient sister of mine could harbor such madness and cruelty. Sister, why are you so quiet? She asked, pouting her lips and looking at me with a hurt expression, her eyes glistening with what seemed like genuine sorrow at being rebuffed. Do you dislike the luminous pearl I brought you? I suppressed the flood of doubts and anger surging within me, forcing a smile as I spoke to her. Of course not, I deeply appreciate your kindness, dear sister, but this pearl was a gift from His Majesty to you. It would be highly inappropriate for you to pass it on to me. Inappropriate, she replied naturally, her pure, innocent eyes showing no trace of insincerity. Sister, I only want to give you all the best things in the world. Wow, what a huge luminous pearl, it's almost as big as Auntie's face. At that moment, the crown prince, who was eating his morning meal, suddenly piped up, you little rascal, are you teasing me about my big face? My sister let out a coquettish laugh, then began to playfully chase and tickle the crown prince, just as she always did. Watching the two of them frolicking together, my eyes instantly welled up with tears. This was the day. Today, the Crown Prince would go to the Imperial study for his lessons as usual, and soon after, he would throw himself into the well and die. Last time, when I rushed to the Imperial study, I had only been greeted by his cold, lifeless body. I had held his small, rigid form in my arms, sobbing until I nearly fainted, but the Crown Prince's tutor had accused me of being the cause of his death. Claiming that the prince had taken his own life to escape my endless abuse, he had even said that the Crown Prince had once confided in him that he would rather die than return to Cunning Palace. As I was arguing fiercely with the tutor, my sister had arrived in a hurry. I had thought she would stand up for me and clear my name, but instead, she had stood before the crowd, her eyes red with tears, and screamed at me in righteous fury. Ever since I moved into Cunning Palace, I have watched you beat and torture the Crown Prince every single day. I begged you to stop, but you would just hit me too. I cannot understand it. The Crown Prince is so lively, intelligent, kind, and adorable. How could you bring yourself to treat him this way? He is your own flesh and blood, the son you carried in your womb for 10 months. He is the future emperor of this realm. Why did you have to drive him to his death? Every word she spoke was filled with blood and tears. Her voice trembling with genuine grief and indignation. She had publicly listed all my supposed atrocities, painting me as a cruel, sadistic monster who took pleasure in inflicting pain on others. My desperate attempts to defend myself were drowned out by the jeers and skeptical stares of the crowd. Then the imperial physician arrived to examine the Crown Prince's body and lifted his robe to reveal the dense, overlapping scars covering his skin, old wounds, and new. Crisscrossing every inch of his small frame, the imperial physician had taken one look and declared without a shadow of a doubt that these injuries could only have been caused by years of prolonged, brutal abuse. The evidence was irrefutable. The emperor's anger knew no bounds. He had ordered me to be paraded through the streets that very day. A tiger does not devour its own cubs. How dare she, the mother of the nation, act like such a beast and torture her own son to death? I heard the Crown Prince was not only exceptionally bright but also brave and wise beyond his years, a true heir to the throne. To think such a promising young talent was destroyed by a monster like her. This evil empress is guilty of heinous crimes. She does not deserve to wear the imperial crown. Even beheading her in public would not be enough to avenge the Crown Prince. Yes, a monster like her deserves the most cruel punishment imaginable, to comfort the Crown Prince's spirit in the afterlife. Amidst the furious curses of the people, the emperor had subjected me to unspeakable tortures, before finally ordering me to be torn apart by 5 horses and my remains fed to the dogs. Even as I died, I could not understand why my precious son, whom I had held in the palm of my hand and cherished more than my own life, had ended his life covered in scars. The agony of my past life was still vivid in my mind, as clear as if it had happened yesterday. This time, I would get to the bottom of everything. As my sister and the Crown Prince were playing, a eunuch arrived from the imperial study to fetch the prince for his lessons. My sister excused herself politely and left. I turned to the eunuch and said calmly, "Please wait a moment, eunuch. The prince's hair has become messy from all the playing. Allow me to rebind it for him before he leaves." With that, I took the Crown Prince's hand and led him into my bedroom. Once the door was shut tight, I lifted his robe without hesitation and examined his body carefully. Beneath the fabric, his skin was smooth and unblemished, like fine jade. Not a single bruise or scratch marred his body. It was completely different from the scar-covered corpse I had seen in my past life. So where had everything gone wrong? Why, in just a few short hours, would his body be covered in a tangled web of old and new wounds? I was utterly bewildered, unable to contain my confusion any longer. I asked the Crown Prince softly, "Your Highness, what do you think of your tutor?" The Crown Prince replied without hesitation, "My tutor is extremely knowledgeable, and he treats everyone with great respect and courtesy. He is a very good teacher." At the mention of his tutor, the young prince's face lit up with admiration and respect. I looked at him very seriously and asked, "Then what do you think of how your mother treats you?" The Crown Prince blinked his clear, innocent eyes and answered without a moment's thought, "Mother cares for me deeply in every way. There is nothing I could possibly find fault with. The more I listened, the more confused my mind became. Why, in my past life, had I been branded a monster and a child killer when I had done nothing wrong? Why had the Crown Prince left the palace unharmed, only to return from the Imperial study a few hours later covered in years' worth of scars, and then take his own life? Why had my own flesh and blood sister, along with the esteemed Crown Prince's tutor, suddenly turned on me and accused me of crimes I had never committed? The chaotic thoughts swirling in my head triggered my chronic headache. I raised a hand and pressed it gently against my forehead, trying to ease the pain, seeing my discomfort. The Crown Prince's eyes filled with tears. "Mother, have I done something wrong? Please tell me what it is, and I will correct it at once." The Crown Prince's innocent, offhand remark suddenly jolted me out of my confusion. A flash of clarity pierced the fog in my mind. I reached out and stroked his head, a wide smile spreading across my face. "You have done nothing wrong, my dear. On the contrary, you have just helped your mother solve a great mystery." I immediately sent the eunuch to escort the Crown Prince to the Imperial study. Only 2 hours remained until the Crown Prince would throw himself into the well. In my past life, everything had happened so suddenly that I had been powerless to stop it, but this time, I would not sit idly by and wait for my fate to unfold. As soon as the Crown Prince left, I summoned my hidden guards. "I have a task for you," I ordered, my voice cold and resolute. "No matter what the cost, you must see it through. And remember, under no circumstances must a single word of this leak out." 2 hours later, a eunuch from the Imperial study came rushing to Cunning Palace, his face ashen with panic. "Your Majesty, it's a disaster. The Crown Prince has thrown himself into the well in the Imperial study. Please come at once." I ignored him completely, ordering the gates of Cunning Palace to be shut tight once more, then sat down and began to play the cheen again, my movements slow and unhurried. "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince's body has already been pulled out of the well. Noble consort Xian has ordered me to beg you to come to the Imperial study immediately." "Your Majesty, the Imperial study is in utter chaos. Please come with me at once." "Your Majesty." The urgent cries of the 18 messengers sent by my sister echoed one after another outside the palace gates. They sounded truly desperate, but I remained completely calm, strumming the strings of the cheen slowly and melodiously. When I finished playing the final note, the palace gates were suddenly smashed open with a loud crash. A squad of Imperial guards burst into the palace, their faces stern and unyielding. "Your Majesty, we apologize for the intrusion. Seize her, take her away." I was roughly dragged out of Cunning Palace and escorted to the Imperial study by force. At that moment, the area around the well in the Imperial study was packed with people. The Emperor stood beside the Crown Prince's body, his face dark with rage, his eyes blazing with fury. Everyone else knelt prostrate on the ground, trembling like leaves in the wind. When I arrived, my sister, her eyes already swollen and red from crying, suddenly surged forward, her voice filled with passionate indignation. "Sister, I begged you so many times to stop torturing the Crown Prince. Why didn't you listen to me? He was your own son, the Dragon Prince you carried for 10 months, not your mortal enemy. How could you be so cruel to him? The Crown Prince was so intelligent, so kind, so full of life. I cannot even imagine how much suffering you put him through to make him choose to drown himself rather than return to Cunning Palace to face you." My sister wept bitterly, pressing a hand to her chest as she gasped for breath between sobs. Her grief-stricken expression was so convincing that it moved everyone present to tears. Even though I had seen this same scene of feigned sorrow and righteous fury in my past life, and even though I had braced myself for it this time, watching the sister who had once been my closest confidant and ally scheme so ruthlessly to destroy me still sent a sharp pang of sorrow through my heart. Before I could even open my mouth to speak, the Crown Prince's tutor stepped forward, his face flushed with anger, and declared in a loud, righteous voice, "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince was a prodigy, exceptionally intelligent, respectful to his elders, and a rare talent. Even if you could not bear him, you had no right to drive him to his death. Before he died, the Crown Prince wept as he told me how you beat him every single day. I thought it was just the childish exaggeration of a young boy and did not take it seriously. But I never imagined that he would actually take his own life because of it. Your Majesty the Empress, the Crown Prince's safety is of the utmost importance to the realm, even if you do not care about state affairs. You must think of His Majesty the Emperor. The Crown Prince was his dearest son. How could you put His Majesty in such a heart-wrenching position? The Crown Prince's tutor spoke with great passion and emotion, tears streaming down his aged face. He accused me furiously, his voice trembling with what seemed like genuine grief and regret. At his words, the Emperor's face darkened until it looked as if it could drip with rage. He fixed me with a cold, piercing gaze and said in a deep, menacing voice, "What else do you have to say for yourself?" I glanced down at the body lying on the ground, then replied with a completely expressionless face. Nothing. To see me so calm, as if the matter had nothing to do with me at all, sent the Emperor into an instant rage. He suddenly drew a sword from the guard standing beside him and pointed it directly at my chest. "You venomous woman, you murdered my Crown Prince, yet you feel not an ounce of guilt." Looking at the Emperor, his face turning purple with anger, my heart suddenly felt as cold as ice, frozen to the very core. In my past life, the Crown Prince's death had broken my heart into 1,000 pieces. The accusations from noble consort Xian and the tutor had drained me of all strength and hope. I had felt so wronged, so desperate to defend myself, but the Emperor had only looked at me coldly and said, "The way you scramble to lie and defend yourself makes me sick." He had forgotten the years I had spent by his side, fighting to help him conquer the empire. He had forgotten how I had saved his life at the cost of my own well-being. He had forgotten the oath he had once whispered to me as he held me in his arms, that no matter what happened, no matter what others said, he would always believe me, without question. Instead, he had punished me with the most cruel and brutal method imaginable, denying me even the dignity of a full corpse after death. Now, in this life, I had chosen not to defend myself, and still, he had drawn his sword against me without a moment's hesitation. I let out a bitter, mocking laugh and said nothing more. The Emperor was so enraged that he threw the sword violently to the ground. "To kill you so easily would be far too kind. Guards, take this wicked woman into custody, parade her through the streets. I want the entire nation to see the fate that befalls a monster like her." At his command, several Imperial guards immediately seized me and dragged me into a prisoner's cart. In the crowded city streets, I was paraded in disgrace, my supposed crimes shouted out to the crowds by the criers. In an instant, the people were whipped into a frenzy of anger. They pointed their fingers at me and screamed insults. "Empress, my foot. Even the beasts in my yard know to love their young. You are worse than an animal. What is wrong with this evil witch? How could she torture her own child like this without fearing divine retribution?" The Crown Prince was only 8 years old. Yet everyone knew how intelligent and humble he was. To think such a promising child was destroyed by a deranged monster like her. This evil empress is guilty of unspeakable crimes. Heaven and earth are both angered by her deeds. She must be given the most severe punishment possible. The people of the entire city were beside themselves with rage, shaking their fists and shouting furiously. Countless rotten vegetables and stinking eggs were thrown at me, pelting my body relentlessly. I was submerged in a pile of foul-smelling garbage, denounced by thousands. Looking up at the faces of the crowd, their eyes burning with a hatred so intense that they seemed to want to grind my bones to dust, the corners of my mouth lifted into a faint smile. Then I did something that shocked the entire nation. Standing tall in the prisoner's cart, I tilted my head back and shouted at the top of my lungs, "Zhu Ernu, you are nothing but a tyrant, a beast. Come out here and face me like a man." I poured all my strength into my voice, making it ring out louder than the endless jeers and curses of the crowd. My words echoed down the entire length of the street. The enraged crowd, who had been screaming and shouting just moments before, fell completely silent. Then, one by one, they dropped to their knees, their faces turning as white as paper, their bodies trembling violently with fear. Zhu Ernu was the Emperor's childhood nickname. Back when we were fighting together to conquer the empire, I had called him by that name all the time. Back then, he would always blush and laugh, saying that hearing such a rough, unrefined name fall from my lips made his heart flutter, that it sounded strangely pleasant to his ears. on those countless nights when we had slept side by side on the hard ground of the battlefield, he would always hold me in his arms and ask me to whisper his nickname in his ear, over and over again. He had told me that he wanted to hear me call him that for the rest of his life, but then he had ascended to the throne, he had become the Son of Heaven, admired and revered by all, he held the lives of millions in his hands, ruled over the entire realm, and when I had called him by his nickname after that, he had scolded me sharply, his face dark with displeasure. Presumptuous, I am now the emperor of the realm, the ruler of all under heaven, as my empress. You should know your place and show me the respect I deserve. I would never forget the look in his eyes when he had said those words. All the tenderness and warmth that had once filled them was gone, replaced only by anger at having his imperial dignity challenged. From that day on, the name Zhu Erniu had become the emperor's most sensitive taboo. Once, the Chanyu of the Xiongnu had mocked the emperor by using this nickname in public. The emperor had been so furious that he had personally led hundreds of thousands of troops on a punitive expedition against the Xiongnu. The battle had been brutal, rivers of blood flowing across the battlefield. He had captured the Chanyu alive, cut off his head, and hung it at the gates of the capital city as a warning to all who dared to defy him. Since that day, no one in the entire realm had dared to utter that name aloud ever again. By speaking it now, in front of the entire nation, I had committed the ultimate act of treason. Even the guards escorting the prisoner's cart were so terrified that they froze in their tracks, trembling like leaves in the wind. General Pei, the leader of the escort, glared at me furiously and roared, "How dare you? How dare you publicly defile His Majesty's sacred name?" I met General Pei's gaze head-on, my face remaining calm and composed, and said in a clear, firm voice that cut through the silence, "I am merely speaking the truth. How is that defiling his name? He is a tyrant, a beast. He wants to kill me to silence me. Zhu Erniu, a tyrant like you is destined to die young, to burn for eternity in the deepest pits of hell. Your empire is doomed to fall." I shouted my accusations fearlessly, my voice ringing out loud and clear. General Pei was so angry that his face turned bright red, the veins on his neck bulging with rage. "You murdered the crown prince. And now you have the audacity to publicly insult and slander His Majesty the Emperor. You are courting death." With that, he drew his sword and pointed it directly at my throat. I let out a cold, mocking laugh, my expression remaining completely calm and unafraid. "What, do you dare to kill me? If you slay me here, in front of all these people, you will prove every word I have said to be true. You will confirm to the entire nation that Zhu Erniu is indeed a tyrant who silences his critics with murder. If you do not wish for Zhu Erniu to go down in history as a tyrant reviled for all eternity, then go to him at once, tell him to come here and face me, to confront me in front of the entire nation. Otherwise, if you kill me now to silence me, he will never let you get away with it." General Pei, who had been consumed by rage just moments before, froze completely at my words. He frowned deeply, lost in thought for a moment, then slowly lowered his sword. He turned to the guards standing nearby and ordered in a stern voice, "Keep a close watch on her. Do not let anything happen to her. If she so much as gets a scratch, none of you will live to see another day." After giving his orders, he mounted his horse and galloped toward the palace as fast as he could. A short while later, the emperor arrived, surrounded by a large contingent of imperial guards. He rode on his horse, looking majestic and imposing, his presence radiating an aura of overwhelming authority that silenced the entire crowd. "Hail His Majesty the Emperor! Long live the Emperor! Long live! Long live!" The entire crowd knelt down and kowtowed, trembling with fear. Every single person kept their head bowed deeply, terrified of incurring the emperor's wrath and bringing disaster upon themselves. The emperor ignored the crowd completely. Riding his horse straight up to the prisoner's cart, he looked down at me coldly and said, "You murdered my crown prince, yet you refuse to repent. How dare you stand here and call me a tyrant in front of the entire nation?" The emperor's voice was thick with rage, as if he was barely able to contain his fury. I met his gaze directly and replied calmly, "Zhu Erniu, we have known each other for half our lives. You know me better than anyone else in this world. Do you truly believe that I am a venomous, heartless monster who would murder her own flesh and blood? The emperor frowned slightly, hesitated for a brief moment, then said, perhaps you would not have done such a thing once. But the harem is a place of endless intrigue and betrayal. People change. I do not speak of the past, I only judge based on the evidence before me now. Looking at the emperor's solemn, righteous expression, I laughed, laughing until tears streamed down my face. What a convenient excuse, people change. What a perfect justification, endless intrigue and betrayal. What a fine man you are, Xianxia. I was so foolish, because you once said that you wanted to spend the rest of your life with me. I waited for you, year after year. I waited for you from the rivers and lakes, to the blood-soaked battlefields, and then from the battlefields to the imperial palace. I never imagined that in the end, all I would get in return is this. People change. It is not me who has changed, Xianxia. It is you. The emperor stared at me deeply, his anger threatening to boil over at any moment. What exactly are you trying to say? I swallowed back the last of my tears, looking at the emperor with a cold, detached gaze. You just said that the harem is a place of endless intrigue and betrayal. Then I ask you this, what possible benefit could I gain from killing the crown prince? I am already the empress. All I need to do is fulfill my duties. And I can rule the harem in peace. All I need to do is protect the crown prince. And I can live the rest of my life without a single worry. Why would I kill the crown prince, and cut off my own path to the future? Why would I commit such a heinous crime, and cruelly drive my own son to his death? My questions rang out loudly and clearly, echoing across the silent crowd. The people of the city, who had been kneeling on the ground in fear, could not help but lift their heads. Murmurs of doubt spreading among them. She is right. She is already the empress. What could she possibly gain from killing the crown prince? Could it be that she really has been framed? The whispers of the crowd drifted into the emperor's ears. He frowned slightly, falling into deep thought. After a moment, he looked at me again and said in a deep voice, if you are truly innocent, why did you not explain yourself back in the palace? I let out a cold snort. From the moment you sent your guards to drag me to the imperial study, you had already made up your mind that I was the one who killed the crown prince. Is that not the truth? If I had tried to explain myself back then, would you have believed me? My question caused a flicker of guilt to cross the emperor's face. Before he could reply, the crown prince's tutor and noble consort Xian arrived in their sedan chairs, one after the other, as soon as she reached the prisoner's cart. Noble consort Xian raised her chin and spoke to me in a righteous, indignant voice. Sister, I never imagined that even now, at a time like this, you would still refuse to repent for your crimes. Since you are so stubborn, then I have no choice but to stop protecting your reputation. With that, she pulled something out from her sleeve and handed it to the emperor. It was a letter written in blood. On the letter, the crown prince had accused me of torturing him relentlessly for years. Every word written in vivid, heart-wrenching detail, the lines were filled with unspeakable pain and sorrow. Your Majesty, this is the suicide note that the crown prince left behind in the imperial study. I cannot even begin to imagine how a young child like him endured years of such cruel abuse at my sister's hands, suffering in silence for so long. Noble consort Xian once again displayed her masterful acting skills. Covering her face with her hands and bursting into loud, heartbroken sobs, the crown prince's tutor stepped forward promptly to echo her words, falling to his knees before the emperor. Your Majesty, the crown prince was my most beloved student, a child with a heart of gold. I beg you, Your Majesty, you must avenge his death. Do not let him rest in peace with such injustice weighing on his soul. The two of them sang in perfect harmony. Once again painting me as a monster hated by both heaven and earth, the emperor looked down at the blood letter, his voice hoarse with emotion. It is the crown prince's handwriting. His tone was filled with deep sorrow and anger, his eyes fixed firmly on the letter, his vision blurred with tears. Then he turned to glare at me again, grinding his teeth as he spoke. Now what else do you have to say for yourself? How can you possibly deny this? I replied coldly. It is nothing but a letter written in blood. How hard can it be to forge someone's handwriting? With that, I turned to look at noble consort Xian, my eyes filled with undisguised contempt. My dear sister, You have truly gone to extraordinary lengths to steal my position as empress, have you not?" Upon hearing my words, noble consort Xian, who had been sobbing into her hands, suddenly froze. But the emperor, eager to defend noble consort Xian, turned to me and roared in anger. "The evidence against you is overwhelming, both witness testimony and material proof. How dare you still try to shirk responsibility for your crimes? Noble consort Xian is your own flesh and blood sister. You know better than anyone else how pure and kind her heart is. Do you really think she would frame you out of nowhere? You have gone completely mad with cruelty, and now you have the audacity to accuse her of upholding justice even at the cost of her own family." The emperor painted noble consort Xian as a paragon of virtue and innocence, while branding me as the embodiment of all evil. The look he shot me was filled with nothing but fury and hatred. Staring at the face I had loved for half my life, a wave of bitter sorrow surged up in my heart once again. How ridiculous, how pathetic. For me, it is nothing but a dismissive people change, but for her, it is pure and kind by nature. You trust her, this so-called paragon of virtue, so blindly. Then perhaps you should stop and think, if I were to die, who would be the greatest beneficiary in the harem? If the crown prince were to die, who would be the greatest beneficiary among all the imperial princes? Is it not your beloved, pure-hearted noble consort Xian and her son? My words caused the emperor's face, which had been flushed with rage just moments ago, to change color slightly. Seeing this, noble consort Xian immediately pointed at me and screamed hysterically, "Sister! What is done in the dark will eventually come to light. I merely exposed your heinous crimes to the world. How dare you slander me like this out of malice? Killing the crown prince was not enough for you, was it? Now you want to drag me down with you as well. How can your heart be so black, so utterly devoid of humanity?" Noble consort Xian's timely display of grief and victimhood was enough to sway the wavering emperor, cementing his belief in my guilt once more. He glared at me fiercely again, his voice cold and menacing. "Do you really think your baseless accusations alone will make me doubt her innocence? You are truly incorrigible. Even now, on the brink of your downfall, you still seek to destroy others." I let out a cold laugh, amused by the emperor's sheer stupidity. "I call you a tyrant, and you refuse to believe it. You have been fooled by her for all these years. And yet you still defend her so fervently. How utterly foolish and laughable you are. Since you refuse to believe my one-sided words, then I shall show you some hard evidence instead." With that, I looked straight ahead and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Bring him out." As soon as the words left my lips, my hidden guards dragged a young man over to the prisoner's cart. "Your Majesty the Empress, the man is here." The emperor studied the young man carefully, a look of confusion crossing his face as he turned to me and asked, "This is the crown prince tutor's personal attendant, is it not? What is the meaning of bringing him here?" I met the emperor's gaze directly and said in a solemn, earnest tone, "You claim to believe so firmly in noble consort Xian's virtue and innocence. Why not ask him about the nature of her relationship with the crown prince tutor?" At my words, the emperor's face changed dramatically. He immediately turned to the tutor's attendant and barked out a command, "Speak, tell me everything you know." The emperor's roar sent the attendant scrambling to his knees, trembling violently as he stammered out his reply. I serve the crown prince tutor faithfully, Your Majesty, for years. I have seen noble consort Xian meet with him secretly, their interactions far closer than what would be deemed appropriate. Once, I even accidentally overheard them talking about, shut up. Before the attendant could finish his sentence, the crown prince tutor's face turned bright red with rage as he cut him off with a thunderous shout, "You traitorous, ungrateful cur, do not dare to spout such lies here, in front of His Majesty." Noble consort Xian also flew into a rage, screaming at the top of her lungs, "How dare you, you lowly servant? I have never done you any harm, never wronged you in any way. Why do you slander me so viciously, framing me for crimes I did not commit?" The two of them were almost beside themselves with rage, their performances so convincing that they looked like innocent victims wrongfully accused. The emperor shot them both a sharp, warning glare, silencing them with a single look. Then he turned back to the trembling attendant and demanded, "What did you hear them talking about?" The attendant's voice shook like a leaf as he replied, "I heard them plotting to put her son on the throne as the next crown prince." The moment the words left his mouth, the crowd erupted into an uproar. Could it be that there really is more to this story than meets the eye? If noble consort Xian really is colluding with the crown prince tutor, then could it be that the empress really was framed all along? As the murmurs and whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire, the emperor's face grew increasingly dark and stormy. The crown prince tutor, however, was quick to defend himself. Falling to his knees and begging for mercy, "Your Majesty, I have always been loyal to you, faithful unto death. Please do not believe the lies of this treacherous servant. This man has clearly been bribed or coerced into making these false accusations against me. I beg you, Your Majesty, see through his deceit and grant me justice." Upon hearing this, noble consort Xian also rushed to defend herself, tears streaming down her face as she knelt before the emperor. "Your Majesty, my love for you is pure and true, without any ulterior motives. I have never betrayed you. This is all a scheme orchestrated by my sister. She must have bribed or threatened this servant into lying, into sowing discord between us and ruining my reputation. I never imagined that to cover up her own crimes, she would go to such lengths. She is even willing to destroy my good name in front of the entire nation." The two of them continued to protest their innocence. Their voices filled with feigned grief and indignation, but the emperor's gaze remained cold and sharp as he fixed it on the tutor's attendant, his voice dripping with menace. "I will ask you one more time, are the words you spoke just now the truth? If there is even a single lie in what you have said, I will have your entire clan put to death." The attendant kowtowed repeatedly, his forehead banging against the ground as he confessed in a voice filled with terror. "I speak nothing but the truth, Your Majesty. May heaven strike me down with lightning if I have told a single lie." Seeing this, the emperor's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits, his gaze cold and piercing. "I spoke up at the perfect moment, my voice calm and deliberate. If you still harbor any doubts, Your Majesty, we can perform a blood test right here, right now. Let us see whose blood runs through the veins of noble consort Xian's son." The moment I suggested this, both noble consort Xian and the crown prince tutor paled dramatically, panic evident in their eyes. Noble consort Xian threw herself at the emperor's feet, clutching at the hem of his imperial robe as she begged him frantically, "Your Majesty, my sister is clearly consumed by jealousy over our close relationship. She is deliberately trying to turn you against me. Please do not fall for her tricks. If we really perform this blood test, what will become of our son? How will he ever hold his head up in the palace again? Do you really want to see him become a laughingstock for the entire nation?" The crown prince tutor also fell to his knees, adding his pleas to hers, "Your Majesty, once this blood test is done, no matter what the result is, it will irreparably damage the royal family's reputation. I beg you think carefully before you act." Watching them panic like cornered rats, I let out a cold, mocking laugh. The way noble consort Xian and the crown prince tutor are so terrified of this blood test makes them look incredibly guilty. Does it not? What do you think, Your Majesty? I looked at the emperor with a playful, taunting smile, relishing the look of growing anger and humiliation on his face. A slow, cold sense of vindication spread through my heart. Seize both of them and throw them in chains, despite his desire to uncover the truth. The emperor ultimately chose to preserve the royal family's dignity over all else. He did not order the blood test to be performed in public. Instead, he shot noble consort Xian and the crown prince tutor a glare so venomous it could have killed, then ordered his guards to take them both into custody. Then he turned to me, his jaw clenched so tightly that I could see the muscles bulging, and said each word slowly, as if they were being torn from his very soul. "So you knew about their scheme all along. You knew that noble consort Xian's son is not mine. You deliberately chose not to tell me in the palace, waiting instead to humiliate me in front of the entire nation like this." Seeing the emperor's face turn crimson with rage, I admitted the truth without hesitation. "That is correct." The emperor's fury exploded like a volcano. "Even if you did not kill the crown prince, your act of publicly disgracing the royal family is still punishable by death." As he spoke, his eyes blazed with a murderous rage, his gaze sharp enough to cut through steel. I knew in that moment that he intended to kill me, even though he now knew that I had been framed for the crown prince's death by noble consort Xian and the tutor. Even though he knew that I was an innocent victim of their treachery, he still viewed me as his mortal enemy. How utterly ridiculous. A cold wind blew, whipping my hair back from my face. It carried with it the last remaining embers of my love for the emperor. Snuffing them out completely, I let out a cold, fearless laugh and said, "You cannot kill me, Your Majesty." The moment the words left my lips, the entire crowd fell dead silent, shocked to the core. Everyone stared at me, their faces filled with confusion and disbelief. The emperor let out a harsh, mocking snort. "I am the emperor of this great nation. I hold the power of life and death over every single person in my realm. What makes you think that I cannot kill a mere woman like you?" As he spoke, his expression was filled with the arrogant disdain of a ruler looking down on an insignificant insect. In his eyes, I was nothing more than a tiny, helpless ant, something he could crush to dust with a single flick of his finger. But he had forgotten one crucial thing. This empire was as much mine as it was his. "Your Majesty, Your Majesty, it is a disaster." Before I could reply, a blooded imperial guard came stumbling out from the direction of the palace, his voice filled with panic. The entire crowd turned to look at him, their faces etched with fear. The guard tripped and fell to the ground, scrambling to his knees as he screamed, "Your Majesty, General Wu Jing, the commander of the Imperial Guards, has led a rebellion. He has already seized control of the entire palace." The moment the words left his mouth, the crowd erupted into chaos. Screams of terror echoing through the streets. Even the emperor, who had stood so proudly just moments before, stared at me with his eyes wide open, his face drained of all color, unable to believe what he was hearing. Wu Jing had been nothing more than a lowly foot soldier when I had saved his life on the battlefield all those years ago, back when I was fighting alongside the emperor to conquer the empire, impressed by his skill with a sword and his sharp, tactical mind. I had taken him under my wing, teaching him everything I knew about warfare and strategy. Together, we had fought countless battles, winning victory after victory for our cause. When the empire was finally ours, he had been rewarded for his countless achievements with the position of commander of the Imperial Guards. For all these years, I had lived quietly in the harem, while he served the emperor loyally, protecting him from all threats. The emperor had foolishly believed that Wu Jing's loyalty lay with him, but he had never realized that Wu Jing's loyalty was to me and me alone. "So you lured me out of the palace today to stage a coup d'état." It was only at this moment that the emperor finally understood, panic filling his eyes as he stared at me. The look of arrogant disdain was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated fear. My expression remained cold and impassive as I replied, "That is correct. As I told you before, this empire was never meant for you to rule." As soon as the words left my lips, a massive army of Imperial Guards appeared on the horizon, led by none other than General Wu Jing himself. They marched forward in perfect formation, surrounding the crowd completely, their spears and swords glinting in the sunlight. "Your Majesty the Empress." Wu Jing bowed deeply to me, his voice filled with the utmost respect and loyalty. Then he drew his sword and sliced through the wooden bars of the prisoner's cart with a single, powerful stroke. I stepped out, finally free, and stood tall amidst the terrified crowd. My presence radiated an aura of authority and power that silenced everyone around me. The people fell to their knees, trembling with fear as they begged for mercy. "Please spare us, Your Majesty the Empress. We beg you for forgiveness." The only sound that filled the air was the endless chorus of terrified pleas. Just a short while ago, these same people had cursed me, spat at me, and thrown garbage at me. They had reviled me as a monster, a witch, a child killer desperate to tear me apart limb from limb. But now, they knelt before me, kowtowing repeatedly, their faces pale with terror. They feared nothing more than my vengeance. I ignored them completely, my gaze fixed solely on the emperor. "Once upon a time, I fought alongside you to conquer this empire, to win this throne," I said, my voice calm and clear, ringing out across the silent crowd. "I did it because I loved you. I was willing to sacrifice everything to build this great nation for you. to stand by your side as your empress and support you in every way. But what did you do in return? You distrusted me at every turn, seeing me as a threat to your power. And the moment you saw an opportunity, you did not hesitate to condemn me to death. Was it because you feared the power of my supporters in the court? Because their loyalty to me made you feel insecure? I never wanted this throne, I never craved power or authority. But your betrayal taught me a valuable lesson, that the only way to be truly safe in this world is to hold the power in your own hands. Now it is time for you to step down from the throne. The emperor, who had always been so calculating and in control, finally lost his composure completely. His Adam's apple bobbed nervously as he stared at me, his voice deep and pleading. If your resentment stems from my misunderstanding about you killing the crown prince, then I will order a full and thorough reinvestigation of this case immediately. I will execute everyone who framed you for this heinous crime. We have been husband and wife for so many years. There is no need to drive things to such an irreconcilable impasse. Watching the man who had just been so eager to put me to death now groveling and begging for mercy, I let out a cold, mocking laugh. Your Majesty, when you were drawing your sword to kill me just now, why didn't you think about our years as husband and wife? If I had not prepared a backup plan, I would already be a cold corpse by now, would I not? As for reinvestigating the case, there is no need to trouble yourself. I will personally ensure that not a single person who conspired against me escapes justice. As I spoke, my gaze fixed sharply on noble consort Xian and the crown prince tutor, under my piercing stare. Noble consort Xian's body trembled violently with fear, then she summoned up all her courage and screamed, You cannot kill me. I will tell you the truth, the crown prince is not dead at all. The boy who drowned in the well was a double we spent countless efforts searching the entire nation to find. A boy who looked exactly like the crown prince. The scars covering his body were inflicted by us, day after day, just to frame you for child abuse. The real crown prince is still in our hands. We prepared for this worst-case scenario from the very beginning. He is our final trump card. If you dare to harm us in any way, the real crown prince will pay with his life. The crown prince tutor quickly joined in, his voice filled with desperation. That's right. If either of us suffers even the slightest injury, you will never see the real crown prince again for the rest of your life. If you truly do not care about the crown prince's safety, then you will forever be known as the venomous, heartless witch who abandoned her own child. Your reputation will be ruined forever, reviled by the entire nation. You will never be able to hold on to this empire, no matter how hard you try, so you had better let us go at once. In a desperate bid to save their own lives, noble consort Xian and the crown prince tutor spilled all their secrets, laying bare their entire conspiracy without hesitation. They even dared to threaten me with the crown prince's life, hoping to force me to back down. Upon hearing their shocking confession, the crowd erupted into gasps of disbelief and horror. The emperor's eyes turned blood-red as he glared at them, his jaw clenched so tightly that his teeth were on the verge of shattering. After all, everything that had happened, his rage, his humiliation, his decision to condemn me to death, had been triggered by the supposed death of the crown prince. But now it turned out that the entire thing had been nothing more than an elaborate hoax orchestrated by these two traitors. Not only had they carried on an adulterous affair behind his back and conceived a child together, making a fool of him in the most humiliating way possible, but they had also dragged him into this mess, putting his throne and his life in mortal danger. It was more than he could bear. As for me, however, I remained perfectly calm and composed, faced with their blatant threats. I simply smiled faintly and said, Who told you that the crown prince is in your hands? With that, I clapped my hands twice. The next moment, the crown prince stepped out from behind General Wu Jing, walking slowly toward me with a calm expression. How is this possible? We clearly had the crown prince locked away in a secret hiding place. How could he possibly be here? Noble consort Xian and the crown prince tutor stared at each other in stunned silence, their faces drained of all color. Their eyes filled with pure, unadulterated terror. Did you really think that I was unaware of your despicable little scheme? I looked at the two of them as if they were nothing more than pathetic clowns, my voice cold and laced with sharp sarcasm. For the first time, The two conspirators who had been so confident and arrogant just moments ago finally felt the icy grip of fear clutching their hearts. They collapsed to the ground simultaneously, their faces as white as a sheet. Their bodies trembling uncontrollably. Seizing this opportunity, the emperor turned to me and spoke again, his tone once more filled with the arrogant certainty of a ruler who believed he still held all the cards. "A woman and a child, do you really think you can hold on to this vast empire? Now that the truth has been revealed and the crown prince is safe and sound, there is no need to continue this farce. From now on, I will treat you with the respect and affection you deserve. As for the throne, you are merely a woman. Do not harbor such unrealistic delusions of grandeur." The emperor looked at me, his expression smug and condescending, as if he had me completely under his thumb. I met his gaze directly, raising an eyebrow in a cold, disdainful challenge. "Is that so? Then I will spare your life. I want you to live and see with your own eyes how prosperous and thriving this empire will become without you, without its so-called rightful emperor." With those final words, I turned and walked slowly toward the palace, taking the crown prince's hand in mine. Behind me, General Wu Jing raised his sword and brought it down in a single, swift stroke. Noble consort Xian and the crown prince tutor were beheaded on the spot. Their heads were then hung high above the city gates as a warning to all who dared to betray their empress and their country. As for the emperor, General Wu Jing shattered both his legs with a heavy blow of his sword, then stripped him of all his titles and exiled him to the streets as a beggar. On that very day, the crown prince ascended the throne as the new emperor of the realm, and I, in my capacity as the empress dowager, ruled from behind a silk screen. Holding the reins of power firmly in my hands, I governed the entire empire with wisdom and authority. From that day forward, the world lost a quiet, retiring empress known for her virtue and piety, but in her place, it gained an empress dowager whose name would be remembered throughout history, a ruler admired and revered by all for her wisdom, her strength, and her unwavering dedication to her people and her country.